welcome back to NCSY Pulse. We are powered by NCSY Alumni. It is my great pleasure to have with us today Anat Ishai of Israel, but formerly of, I believe, Toronto, Canada. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, excellent. Anat, welcome to NCSY Pulse. It is so cool to have you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm actually sitting in the cold Toronto White North as we speak, visiting my parents. I'm looking forward to returning back to Israeli blue skies.
I can totally relate to that. I was in Israel a couple weeks ago, and I live in New York. I did not miss the weather from New York. But lest you think that I am a tried and true New Yorker weather-wise, I actually grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I can relate to your not loving the cold. People tell me, "Oh, this must be like a spring day for you. You must love the cold."
No,
No,
my
I
dream was
fled.
always to be able to visit winter. I
Yeah.
don't, it's not that I don't like winter and the white stuff on the ground. It's just I wanted to be able to visit winter and then say goodbye. So I'm kind of living out my dream.
Beautiful. That is the dream, and I am totally here for it. I agree with you 100%. When people ask me, "Don't you love the cold?" I always tell them, "No, I fled the cold to get here." So I'm with you.
I hear. And
So
by the way, I want to tell you, I was born in Israel in August on a very hot evening in the suburbs of Tel Aviv. So being warm and being extra schwitzy is like a natural habitat for me.
it's in your blood.
It's
Okay,
important. Yeah.
I'm with you. Anat, you are known now, I think, famously as the Challah Mom. So give us a little backstory. We'll get to your NCSY origins soon, but tell us a little bit about the Challah Mom. How did it begin, and how did it become such a big part of your life?
So I don't know if you remember in the height of COVID, and I hate to, all great stories, by the way, start with, and it was a dark, dark night. And, like that's going to be my, that's going to be the beginning of all my Challah Mom stories. But it was in the height of COVID, where I was finding myself very isolated from people, obviously, because of all the restrictions. And living in Toronto, Canada, we had other layers of restrictions here, and I found myself at home with four children. I grew up one of two. I don't really know how to be a mother of four, and they were quite young at the time, and they were all at home, and it was a really sort of distressing time for me. And I remember trying to make sourdough. Do you remember there was a sourdough craze, right? That
I
we had.
do.
It was like COVID, and now we had a yeast shortage, and then everyone's making sourdough. And I also tried to jump on this new trend, but I couldn't actually get this sourdough started activated. And I felt very defeated, and I couldn't fail at one more thing in life. And I remember I just like needed to go to Costco. I needed to do a Costco run. I go to Costco and I find yeast, and I felt like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, right? Like I got the golden ticket, and I ran home and I made challah because, Shabbat was coming and I wanted just something different. And my kids were like, like this is really great challah. Can you make challah every Shabbat? Like, don't buy it at the store. We really like this. And I thought, great. Yeah, so I did that for a little bit, and it was just a way of regulating my nervous system, like having something to look forward to, instead of like Taco Tuesdays and or Margarita Mondays and Wacky Wednesdays, whatever. Like I was like, we have this thing called Shabbat, and like I have to make certain foods for it, so I'm gonna make the challah. So I decided as that was going well, and it was a way that I was regulating myself, that I would start posting, just like it's me with a challah, like, I know everyone's making sourdough, but like I'm coming to intrude on your parade, and the Jewish people eat this thing called challah. And it really sort of from there, I remember going from like 500 followers, 500 friends, to 1,000 friends. I'm like, whoa, like 500 people really like this picture of the challah. So I started posting pictures like that. And then I remember one day I was just like feeling it, like it was sunny outside. It must have not been winter. And I was dancing with my challah, like just showing this, like I was so proud of this beautiful bread. And that sort of took off with my audience. And I think I was disrupting the notion that somebody that looks like me, somebody who is connected to her Judaism and projects herself into the world as an observant Jewish woman, could be on social media so happy, joyful, colorful, and dancing with this Jewish soul food. And from there, the account sort of took off. I always tell people that challah is the gateway into my platform. But if you stick around long enough, you'll be inspired, because the reality is, like, how much gluten can a person consume? And now, by the way, I realized someone like me could consume a tremendous amount of gluten. But there had to be more to speak about. So the platform evolved to talking about Jewish wisdom, Jewish holidays, hair wrapping tutorials, going to Israel on 1 year adventure, and most recently, Aliyah.
Wow, that is an awesome story. I love how, like you said, things, in the dark times of COVID have really sprung into your Chalamam adventure, but just living in Israel and all these other pieces that sort of sprung out for it. It's so interesting because I grew up, and had my own sort of Jewish growth journey as a kid, but challah was always central to like the Shabbat meal. And you call it the Jewish soul food, which I think is fantastic and so appropriate. Challah has a universal appeal. What do you think it is about challah, about baking challah, that unites Jews from all these different backgrounds?
Yeah, so I think first of all, when it comes to challah, when it comes to bread, I mean, it's the sustenance of life. There's nothing more basic than feeding people something like bread. I think one of the things that I love to share is that there is a real difference between bread and challah. And I call it the Jewish soul food because what we're tasked to do as Jewish people, which I love so much and I teach about, is taking something very physical and elevating to the spiritual. Taking challah, which really is like a hot mess in that bowl. Anyone's ever made challah is like, how in God's name is this ever going to turn into something beautiful? Because you're tasked in life with taking something very ordinary and making it extraordinary. It's really a metaphor for life. And that's why I feel like challah, especially for us Jewish people, it's not something that you eat every single day, but it's a benchmark of something that ends in your week. It's a way to elevate yourself, and it's a way to distinguish that this is not an ordinary thing. This is something extraordinary. You're eating it during extraordinary times, like Shabbat, like holidays, like weddings, like brises. I mean, you're not just eating it. You're not. It's not like a pita, Like we're eating it to mark something beautiful. With respect to challah bakes that I've been doing, so I just recently ran one last night in Toronto. And you know what I noticed is that for me, it's extremely important to set my intention when I make challah. I just said to you a few moments ago that it's not just bread. I mean, this is the Jewish soul food. So if I'm going to make something, and all women know this, especially Jewish mothers in general, we infuse intention and love into the food that we make for our family. And they feel it. They're like, Ima, this is so good. Like I can taste the love of I'm with my parents right now. When my mother makes me my Israeli breakfast in the morning, I feel her love in it. And in the same way, I teach the women that we don't just start off our challah bakes by, dumping the ingredients in. Like before we start anything, set the intention. Kavanah is extremely important. Like, why are you making this? For who are you making this? For what purpose are you making this? And I think that changes the whole experience of making challah, that rather it's just this mundane task. This is really a spiritual opportunity. It's not just a physical opportunity of making something of substance. You're really elevating it to the spiritual.
I'm with you 100%. And it's funny you say like you're infusing it with love. I have a funny quick story. My wife is a doctor, thank God, which is an awesome job to have, but a very, very time consuming job. And so I learned early on when we had kids that I had to do some of the cooking. And typically my wife still does most of it, but I try to help out. And one time, I think it was chicken soup, although I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure now thinking about it that I was making chicken soup. And lucky for me, so that Shabbos night, my kids really enjoyed the chicken soup. And so my wife tried to copy the way I did it the following week. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. And she said, what did you put in that I didn't put in? And I looked at her, sort of dead in the eyes. I'm like, love. I put in love. And if you can think of like the dumber things for a husband to say to their wife, yeah, it was a mic drop, but it was almost a husband drop also.
And I slept on the couch that night.
Yeah, exactly. So I would caution husbands listening that if you're looking for a top 10 list of things not to say to your wife, that probably is on it.
Very important.
Yeah, exactly. 100% it's important. I know that you have this history with NCSY, as you and I were talking before, that you were involved with NCSY pre your Chalamam days. Can you please tell us a little bit about how you got involved in NCSY and what role did it play in shaping your Jewish identity?
Sure. I mean, NCSY had the perfect sales pitch for me. In my freshman year of high school, I remember seeing a sign on the door. It said free pizza, Jewish kids, Monday lunch. And then I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I'm Jewish, I like free, and I love pizza. So I walked into the room and like that, it was very nonchalant. I grabbed my pizza and they're like, come sit, schmooze, whatever. Now they would call it Torah High, but it was just like Monday lunch. And in those Monday lunches, it was my first opportunity to actually start learning a little bit more about Jewish wisdom because I didn't grow up in Hebrew day school. I wasn't afforded the privilege of traditional Jewish education. So my knowledge, my Jewish knowledge was quite limited. Even though I had a very strong Jewish identity, it wasn't rooted in some concrete education, some facts, some knowledge. And I remember one of the first sort of fun quizzes they gave, and I'm quite competitive. So, like, you don't want to play board games with me. And they gave us like a quiz, and like one side, I remember this vividly, one side were like five questions related to, our Christian friends, and the other side were Jewish related questions. And I remember they would say things like, what's the first day of the new year? And I'm like, boom, January 1st. And they're like, good job. They're like, who was JC's mother's name? I'm like, boom, Mary, right? And then the questions went like that. And I'm like, I am killing this. If there's extra pizza, it's coming to me. But then on the Jewish side, that which I didn't know, by the way, there was going to be like the Jewish side of things. They were like, what's the first day of the Jewish New Year? I'm like, boom, Rosh Hashanah. They're like, no, and I'm like, yeah, it's Rosh Hashanah, first day of and they're like, no, no, what's the date? I didn't know that there was a thing like that we called something Tishrei. Like they could have said that just sounded like gibberish to me. So
Right.
I didn't get that one. Then they were like, who was Moses' mother's name? And I was like, I have no clue. I'm like thinking, did I watch The Prince of Egypt? Like, was there a reference to her? Like, I didn't know. I actually didn't know any of what I would consider more fundamental Jewish questions or Jewish base of Jewish knowledge. And that sort of honestly rumbled me a little bit. And I was, as a competitive person, as a person like I should know and I should, I felt a bit vulnerable that day. And I remember going home and testing my mother, like say, oh, maybe she wouldn't know. And the reality is, my mother knew the answers to all those questions because she had come to Israel as a Russian refugee in the 70s. So she came to Israel at age 14. And through her high school career and being in Israel for 15 years, she had accumulated more Jewish knowledge than she was actually passing down to me. And so I felt a little bit gypped, to tell you the truth. And then I was like, you know what? I'm competitive. I want to know more than her. So it was sort of this like inquisitive nature that I had, a little bit of a competitive nature. But most importantly, with NCSY, it was a non threatening, open door policy that I've never had in my life to investigate, to ask what would be considered the stupid questions, but nobody ever made me feel less than for not knowing. So I hold a very, very special place in my heart for NCSY and everything that's done for me.
That's so funny that you talk about seeing the sign that says free pizza and we like free, we like pizza, why not?
Yeah.
It's almost this universal entry point for so many Jewish teens that it's as simple an equation as free pizza, get things moving. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard that sort of start the same way. So interesting the way you talk about how you were more familiar with some of the basic concepts of Christianity than Judaism. That's such like a fascinating thought that as kids, whether you're growing up in Toronto or you're growing up in New York, that it's so pervasive in our culture and in media that we just,
It's like being diaspora Jew. I mean, I still pride myself on the fact that I could outsing anyone in Christmas carols and Christmas songs. Like I know all of them so well. I love to sing them. I love to go to the mall and hear them. But I didn't know all the Hanukkah songs. I didn't know certain songs that were affiliated with our holidays or certain prayers. Like I just wasn't aware. I didn't have an introduction or an entry point to that until NCSY, really.
so tell me a little bit more about your NCSY experience. You came in the door, free pizza,
Yeah.
check. Torah High, check. What happens next? Because it doesn't sound like that was the end of your NCSY journey.
No, it wasn't the end. It would just be the beginning. So I have to tell you that I am indebted to NCSY for many, many things, and we don't even have enough time in this podcast to talk about it. But they gave me two of the greatest gifts of my whole life, and that I'm indebted to them. In the summer that I would be moving from my freshman year to my sophomore year, I was gifted the opportunity, along with 25 kids from Toronto, and much more, many more kids in America, to go to Israel on what would be the first TJJ trip. And on that trip, I fell in love with two things. The first thing is, as an Israeli, I had never been back to Israel since we emigrated to Canada. You see,
Wow.
I don't come from an affluent family, and I come from a very small family. It's just my brother, my parents, and my grandparents, and there was nobody to ever go back to visit in Israel, and we didn't have the means to just go on a family vacation to fly halfway across the world.
Right.
So I'd never gone back, and I went to Israel, and I instantly had this love affair. I got reconnected to my homeland, to my birthplace, and it was such a profound experience. But not even 7 days into the trip, I think it must have been on the fourth day, I fell in love with something else. I actually fell in love with a person. I found on that trip the person that I would end up marrying.
No way.
I met my Bashert in NCSY. I have the T-shirt and everything, and thank God, because of that trip, because of that opportunity, we're going to be celebrating 20 years this summer of marriage and four kids later. And so NCSY has played a huge role in my life for that. Yeah.
All from a slice of free pizza.
All from
That's
place.
where it all started.
I mean, you just don't know what tomato sauce and mozzarella and dough can do for a person.
That is unbelievable. I've heard this story, different versions of this story, so many times
Yeah.
of people who came to NCSY who were just sort of passing through. I'm one of those people who met my wife at NCSY, and so many people meet their spouses at NCSY. It really is an incredible merit for us to say, through this great concept, through these great opportunities and experiences, they really are bonding experiences, and
I'll
and you
tell you
do find people.
I'll tell you one thing that I really, I think is such a differentiator for me with NCSY that I noticed is that in my particular cohort, we had kids that were that were modern Orthodox, that were already observant, mixed with kids that were coming from public school,
Right.
and the ability to have those two groups together was incredible for me because I'll tell you, when I did meet my husband, he was already keeping Shabbat. He was already keeping kosher. I was not. I was not there. But I don't know that I could have related to him. He was a North Star for me, like something I wanted to aspire to or attain. And as I was going through my journey, which would be a very long turtle crawl journey to becoming who I am today, but he was sort of this North Star. And to have somebody that lived a certain way, that was so comfortable and secure in their Jewish identity and in their Jewish life, and someone who supported me in my growth, never judged me because I wasn't quite there yet, and allowed me to be on my path and my pace. Not only was it just him, but even my advisors, my rabbi, my friends in NCSY. It was I always said to myself, years later, I say, I think I was like a closet ortho growing up, like not an orthodontist, like closet person, like I was in the closet because inside I really felt like I was a little Beis Yaakov girl without any Beis Yaakov education, but inside of me was this person that I am today. I just didn't have the proper environment, and the proper opportunities to let her out until later.
That's so cool. Wow. Do you remember any of the names of some of the rabbis or any of the advisors on that first trip?
Yeah, so I will tell you that in Toronto, Canada, Rabbi Black and Reverend
Yeah.
St. Penny Black are people that are really, really close and dear to my heart. I actually grew up in their house, and let me explain. I told you before I didn't come from a family of means, and I really wanted to go on all the Shabbatons. And while they weren't truthfully very expensive, it wasn't something that my parents could afford. So I remember one day when I was speaking to Glenn, I said, I could babysit for your kids, and maybe we could just barter. Like, don't pay me anything, but I'll come on Shabbatons. And so Today, those they're twins, are now married men and have their own children. But I remember just babysitting them in their house and being in a kosher Orthodox Jewish home, seeing the sfarim on the wall, seeing two set of dishes, knowing that if I fed them this, they couldn't eat that, and just how the house functioned was different than the way that I grew up. And they always, 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 and this is what's incredible about people like them. There really are these like angels on earth for people like us, like people like me, is that I used to tell my parents as a teenager that like I'm going to the mall. This is like Saturday morning. I'm like, I'm going to the mall with my friends. I'll be back at like, I don't know, 2. And I would drive my car, park it at the local community center, take a 10-minute walk, go into the teen minyan, the NCSY minyan. I would have Kiddush. Rabbi Black would see me. That was his cue to come up to me to say, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch?" And be like, "I don't know." He's like, "Come to us." And they always had an extra plate set for me. And
Wow.
I saw how they were able to greet people. I really learned like how to honor guests because they would have so many different types of people sitting at their table, eclectic people, interesting people, people like myself, and how they just honored and respected every single person that was not like them that walked through their home. And I remember thinking to myself, if I ever have the opportunity to have a kosher home, a Jewish home, I want to model myself after this home, after these people. And by the way, to this day, I hold the NCSY dishes of Toronto, Canada, the dishes that fed thousands and thousands of kids in their home. I made Aliyah and took all of them with me to Israel. And every time people eat off of these beautiful china plates, they're slightly chipped and slightly broken and cracked. I'm like, these dishes are holy vessels. You do not know how many people, how many holy souls have eaten from these dishes and been washed by holy hands and been served by holy hands. So that, some people just leave an impressionable mark on you. And if we're lucky enough to cross paths with people like Rabbi Black in the NCSY world, they really change you and they really inspire you.
Wow, that is such a cool story. I love Rabbi Black. He has been a friend of mine, a mentor of mine. I met him, must have been 15 years ago or so. He hosted an NCSY sort of at that point, I was young and up and coming. And he hosted a few up and coming directors. And he was so nice and relatable and really just took us all under his wing. And every conference, we've been on many, many, many conferences and Shabbatons and trips together. He always makes it a point to come up to me and check in and see how things are going, even though day to day we really don't have all that much to do with each other. And everything that you're saying, I think I experienced in a microcosm, just over the course of a couple of days, but I see it, I hear it. I totally understand what you're saying. That is Rabbi Black. That is Mrs. Black. They are those people. And hearing you tell this incredible story about them, it brings out the memories for me in the small way that I experienced it, but they really are special. You talk about the Shabbat meals. You talk about the Shabbat dishes. Is there something about Shabbat that was unique to your journey? What was it about your Shabbat meals, whether it was at the Blacks or with other people, that maybe propelled you in terms of your Jewish journey?
Yeah, so as I said, I didn't grow up in like a traditionally, or forget observant, but even a traditional home. We didn't observe Shabbat. Um, my mother has always lit Shabbat candles. I always tell the story that when my mother enlisted in the Israeli army at age 18, they handed her a Tanakh, a gun, and 2 Shabbat candles. And my mother has been lighting Shabbat candles ever since. And I've always seen this eternal light in my home. So I always knew that when she lit the candles, it marked a difference in date, okay? That I knew that it was Shabbat. I wasn't ever really invited to light candles with her, and we never really did anything afterwards. We didn't sit down symbolically and eat. On Saturday, we would have lunches, but I wouldn't call them Shabbat lunches per se. They didn't really, there wasn't really a challah or anything that marked it to be like a Jewish significant meal.
Right.
But I remember going to Shabbat meals at the Blacks and other people's homes, and the one thing that struck me so much was the family sitting together. And the family eating something different. It was like Thanksgiving every single week. And something about family and something about like community and also communal gathering that happened every single week. I'm not a person, I think I'm more like a free bird, but I notice about me, and my husband is more of, the rock and the pillar and regulates himself. I need that regulation. And I think the notion that that's built into already um, into our tradition as Jewish people, and my soul kind of needed that. And so Shabbat meals for me, it's like there's a change in the smell in the house. There's a change in the ambiance, the energy in the house. There's a change in the clothing, the mannerism. There's something that just elevated about Shabbat. It's not even palpable. You can't quantify it in some ways. And all of that, the energy, the essence, the spirituality, things that you can't really describe. You can only say, I felt it. I was missing that feeling, but every time I stepped into someone's home on Shabbat to have a traditional Shabbat meal with them, I felt it, and I knew that I needed that in my life. I knew that I wanted that in my life.
It's very special, and totally can understand where you're coming from, and it's so nice to hear the evolution of how it began. Again, kind of like walking our way back to that first slice of pizza, how that really changed everything, and how special of a life and of a philosophy that you have that kind of started then. Recently, as I follow your exploits online, I've noticed you've become a lot more involved in talking about what's going on in Israel and advocating for Israel. And I'm sure you've received feedback, whether it might be positive feedback or we'll call it not as positive feedback. But what has this kind of new experience in terms of being somebody who now stands up for Israel, I would say heroically, what has that been like for you, and how has the feedback been?
So, first of all, I want to say that it was never my intention to be some sort of advocate for the Jewish people and to combat anti-Semitism. I think that's sort of ingrained as and sort of, I think it's like common knowledge. I'm an observant Jewish woman that made Aliyah and living in Israel. Like, of course, I stand for the Jewish people. Of course, I stand for combating anti-Semitism. I say this quite often, which is the purpose of my Judaism and my Jewish life is not to combat anti-Semitism. But I understand that today I need to combat anti-Semitism for me and for you in order to live the purpose of our Jewish life. You see, I became the Challah mom and created my account before October 7th. I exist to empower and inspire and to enter the hearts of Jewish souls so that they are connected to the most deepest part of their Jewish identity. I don't dictate to them what entry point they should pick. So when October 7th happened, many of us sort of became, there was the Jew before October 7th and the Jew after October 7th. Like, it changed us on a DNA, on a cellular level, and we had to make a decision. I knew that I wanted to expand my platform beyond just those components that I spoke to you about at the top end of our conversation, and I wanted to open it up to hostage families, to the Giborim, the heroes, the soldiers of Israel, and to the day-to-day life that people were experiencing. Because part about making Aliyah, and by the way, I made Aliyah 30 days before October 7th, is
Wow.
that I knew that I needed to stand firm in my convictions and beliefs, and I couldn't lead with fear. I needed to borrow courage from those that had more of it than me. And then once I was able to internalize that and I was able to hone into my Jewish values and take action and know that I have the strength and the DNA of thousands of years of heroes and resilience and Jewish grit, that I could share that over. So it was a no-brainer that I would start talking about my experiences in Israel and share stories. And I do it in the Chalamam way, which is a unique style to me. Some people are more vocal, more advocacy. I do mine in a more like, you know, dancing sort of way, or I just take you around and I show you that I'm living my Jewish life unapologetically, because I don't think that um, I gain less respect for standing up and being an unapologetic Jew in the Jewish homeland. And one thing that was extremely important for me to model, most importantly to my kids, but I think I model to a lot of people, is that it is better to be authentic and to stand firm and tall in your Jewish beliefs and convictions, and to not let your narrative of what it means to be an empowered Jewish woman or Jewish person, a Jewish man, to come from the outside. That narrative is built inside of the DNA, of the history, of the teachings of who we are, and that's what I've been able to do. In terms of combating the hate, listen, when you're sort of disrupting the status quo, if you're sort of doing something a little bit different, you're going to receive a lot of criticism. I do get death threats. I do get a lot of harassment. I do get a lot of hate, blood libel, a lot of different interesting alliterations of anti-Semitism that get sent to me privately, also publicly on my page. But the reality is that I was born and built with a very thick skin. I was raised by Russian Israeli immigrant parents. They have nothing on me. I handle myself quite well.
Wow, that is really inspiring, and it is really, you speak truth, you speak from the heart, and so appreciated and so necessary for all of our NCSYers, all of our alumni, truth be told, to hear. It's really authentic bravery, and in this world, I think we need as much of that as we can possibly get. Anat, you've been so gracious with your time. Just one last question for you. The challah mom has become really a staple, and really what you're doing with the challah bakes and with your standing up for Jewish people and for Israel, phenomenal. What is next for the challah mom?
So it's a great question. So besides just raising 4 incredible, empowered Jewish people in the Jewish homeland, and still adjusting, by the way, to making Aliyah. And
Yeah.
I took Ulpan, I'm continuing to take Ulpan, and just really integrating myself into Israeli society once more, which is a full-time job. So 2 new projects that are coming up the pipeline for me is that I'm starting a new podcast, and it's called We Need to Talk. And on my podcast, I'm teaching different influencers, public figures, or people of influence or notable figures how to make challah with yours truly. But more importantly, I want to expose my audience to different people from different walks of life that stand with Israel and have a message for the Jewish people and have a story to share. It's less about me talking, although I share some insights, but it's more about exposing my audience, my very diverse audience, to an even wider diverse voice. It's very important for me to amplify Jewish voices and the diversity of Jewish voices, including our Jewish allies. And the second thing, which has been a long time coming, is I'm in the works of writing my first book. So one of the first things that I ever did when I entered the social media world was I started to write little blogs for the Times of Israel as a way to just express my voice, have my voice out there. And I love to write, and it requires a little bit of space and time and no stress, which I'm not really getting at the moment. But I hope to create a book that a Jew that maybe is a little disconnected would pick up and feel like they belong to this tribe. That maybe you don't look like me, maybe you don't observe things like me, but I think in standing in my power, I can empower another Jew to take those steps to stand firm in who they are and know that there's a place for them in this tribe called the Nation of Israel, Am Yisrael, and that they belong to us, we belong to them, we belong to each other. And so I hope to write that book, and I hope that it will be well received, and I hope to be able to do it this year.
That is awesome. First of all, I cannot wait to read the book, and I can't wait to listen to and watch the podcast. That sounds phenomenal. And you are an incredible storyteller, so I'm sure that you'll be able to put people into a position to tell their stories, and it's going to be extremely inspirational and probably a lot of fun. So I wish you lots of success in both of those endeavors, and hopefully we'll have you back when all of this is going on and you can tell us all about it.
Would love it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you and your viewers. And I'm really honored to be part of this broader NCSY alumni group.
It's really, the honor is ours. And as I always tell people, we are very busy here telling the NCSY story, and it is a rich story with lots of history and full of really interesting, fun characters like yourself and many of the others we've had here. So Anat, Ishai, the Challah Mom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
You
you.
can follow her on Instagram. You are at Challah Mom, correct?
Yeah, challah.mom.
Challah.mom. Fantastic. Definitely a great follow. Encourage everybody to follow Anat on Instagram, to follow the podcast when it comes out, and read the book. This has been John Ackerman with Anat Ishai on NCSY Pulse, powered by NCSY Alumni. You can follow us on Instagram as well, at NCSY Pulse. Follow us on YouTube at NCSY Pulse. We are on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.